Okay, Kubo. Okay. It's been a while since I've done a video where I need to break it down very strategically to get all my thoughts together in a clear and concise way. But that's what we're gonna do. Because that's what I need to do. Because this was a lot. In my mind, Gin Ichimaru has always been the obviously evil, creepy, smiling snake guy, even before he was revealed to be a traitor, and as Aizen's seemingly biggest supporter. But yeah, I may have misjudged Gin, or maybe not. It's complicated. So, we should really talk about Gin Ichimaru. Let's start with my reaction to this massive reveal itself before getting into the whys and whens of it all. So Gin came back to Aizen after apparently killing Rangiku, which I talked about last video if you missed it, and if you recall, I wasn't entirely convinced that Gin would do that, and thought Aizen was gonna kill him for it, along with how unhelpful he's been this whole arc. Instead, Gin starts explaining how he could kill someone that was so close to him, very blatantly describing himself as a snake. He talks about that he's someone that's cold, merciless, swallowing even people he cares about whole, admitting that it's his nature, who he truly is. He apparently told Aizen this when they first met too, so this is just him reminding his boss that he's a sneaky, slithering kind of guy, which is important because he then extends his blade through his own clothes to suddenly stab Aizen, betraying him. Which is absolute insanity. When I say I was stunned, the word doesn't do it justice, okay? I was shocked. It came out of nowhere. And like looking back, not really. There were hints now that I know. Like everything with Rangiku was just a hint towards this, and a lot of other little moments, but the point is, I didn't see those at the time. I wasn't thinking about those. My mind was veering in the other way. I was thinking Aizen was gonna get him, and instead Gin got Aizen. It was crazy. It's once again a moment that maybe I should have seen coming, but Kubo did such a great job of depicting Gin as a treacherous snake, so I still thought that he was the kind of snake that obeyed his master, but instead, he finally bit him. And Gin had been waiting for this exact moment to do it. Over the last 100 or so years, a little more than that, Gin had grown close enough with Aizen for Aizen to reveal something crucial about his illusions, a weakness. If you touch Aizen's sword, you can get out of being hypnotized by it. So Gin casually touches the sword in a moment that would probably go unnoticed usually before he attacks, which allows him to know what he's attacking is the real deal. I do have a question or two about this though. So when Gin touches the blade, the effects of Aizen's hypnosis over him are gone. But is this true for anyone that touches Aizen's Zanpakuto at any time? When Yamamoto got stabbed by Aizen, for instance, and said that he let it happen to confirm that he was fighting the real Aizen, was it for that reason? Because the hypnosis literally wore off of him in that moment as he was being stabbed? Essentially my question is, when Aizen cuts someone with his blade, does that moment of contact reset his illusions? Does he have to re-hypnotize them again? I feel like that doesn't make sense with what we've seen. Like when he stabbed Momo, did he have to cast an illusion on her again if he wanted to control her? I just have questions. Feel free to answer. We'll move forward. But yeah, moving on. I love that when this happens, while Aizen seems surprised, there's that moment just before when I think he realized what Gin was about to do, because he apparently always suspected that Gin was secretly working against him and just wanted to see how he would make a move, and when. But Aizen knew, because of course he did, he's Aizen. And there are so many moments now that are clear when I was looking back. So many times when Aizen would ask Gin, like, what's he up to? And Gin would give him an answer. And Aizen was very much like, right, yeah, totally. You can see it so clearly now how many times Gin was trying to outsmart him, but Aizen is Aizen. He's the master of illusions, and isn't someone that's easy to fool, no matter how convincingly Gin played the part. And he played the part very convincingly, if you ask me, as someone that got completely tricked by all this. But this whole attack naturally made me ask, why didn't Gin try this earlier? And I remembered that there was a whole little discussion about how Aizen's gotten a little sloppier since evolving. It's implied that he was much more careful before all of this, so Gin probably never found a great opportunity to get close enough back then. There's also the possibility that he wouldn't do it with like Tozen and the Espada around. And this is Aizen we're talking about. Gin has one shot if he wants to do this, and he can't miss. It has to only be the perfect moment and nothing less. So it makes sense why it's happening now rather than any earlier. Aizen is evolved, he's a little confident, he's a little sloppy because nothing can really hurt him. There's no allies around besides Gin. And yeah, it might have been the only chance he really had, and he took it. And though Aizen suspected that this betrayal would eventually come, he didn't suspect what Gin did next, and neither did I, but it was incredible. I adore that Gin lied to Aizen about his Zanpakuto's abilities, because it mirrors how Aizen put so many people under his spell by lying about what his weapon could do. Aizen fell for his own trick. Like a venomous snake, Gin left something deadly behind in Aizen's body, a shard of his sword, poisoning him. This was so good, and I was shocked that it was actually working, as Gin took the Hogyoku from Aizen, as the shard of his blade really did seem to deliver the killing blow. It was just such an incredible moment. For a few seconds, it really seemed like Gin had just killed the main villain of Bleach. I was sitting there like, there's no possible way, right? There's no possible way. Ichigo's not even done training. Gin can't kill Aizen, but for a second, God, so good. But of course, like I said, Aizen is Aizen, and there's a reason that it's taken this long for someone to seemingly kill him. I've spent days reading these chapters just thinking about Gin and what kind of character he is and the space he occupies within this greater story. What kind of person is Gin really? Good? Bad? Hero? Villain? I think the best way to discover that is to peel back the situation he was working within and the decisions he made along the way. Essentially, Gin is a classic example of a double agent character at first. He was seemingly on one side of the conflict while secretly working with the other. Being a double agent is a dangerous thing to be. You have to convince your enemy that you're not an enemy at all, that you are someone that's not only valuable to have around, but trustworthy as well. You have to sell it. And despite being a weird, creepy guy always lurking around, he did convince the Soul Society that he was at least beneficial to them while he was a captain. They kept him around until the moment he deserted them, despite how obviously evil he seemed to me, and to Hitsugaya too, as I was reading the Soul Society arc. He's been presented as treacherous for most of the story. From his design to his personality, he's obviously not someone we were ever supposed to actually trust. Part of the genius of Kubo's writing of Gin, though, is that Gin's duplicitous nature is so in your face and so obvious that you just take it for granted. At least I did, and Kubo keeps using this to great effect. Like, of course he's a traitor in the Soul Society arc. That didn't surprise me, and probably didn't surprise you, because just look at the guy and how he was acting. The surprise then wasn't that Gin was bad, but that Aizen was, and even that Tozen was. It was already presumed of those three that Gin was working against his own people, and that was just true. It was just the case. He was just as bad as Hitsugaya thought he was. He just wasn't the big bad. Gin hides in his blatant untrustworthiness. Being so outwardly cruel and creepy made him an effective red herring during the Aizen betrayal, but now, in a similar way, that same obvious badness, and the assumption that Gin is indeed just a bad guy working with Aizen, hid that his intentions might have been good in the long run. Or if not good, then at least not good for the one we're trying to beat. Because Gin wasn't just a double agent working for Aizen against the Soul Society. No, he was a triple agent where he's actually working against Aizen the whole time, despite seeming to have betrayed the good guys to join him. But none of the Soul Society knows this. He's still on their side, kind of. At least has a common enemy, but even though he betrayed them, and the person he betrayed them for, he's actually betraying him. It's a twisted web that this snake weaves, okay? Crazy. Gin's focus was really on protecting the one one person he seemed to care about. He reminds me more of Severus Snape from Harry Potter. There's even a bit of a Snape connection there with Snape being a Slytherin, but hear me out. Snape seemed to betray the heroes by actually working with Voldemort, when in truth he was still working for the side of good, but what makes him connect most with Geen for me is that Snape was doing it for the sake of a woman he loved, someone that he had cared about since childhood and had been personally harmed by the villain that Snape got close to, and that was secretly working against that guy in order to kind of avenge the woman he loved. Very similar to Geen. So there have been stories like this before with triple agents, as well as those were hidden. I think Kubo did the best job of hiding Geen's actual intentions. As a triple agent, there are layers of betrayal we can peel back here, different sets of skin that Geen finally has a chance to shed. The perpetually smirking, sadistically gleeful, and carefree persona was the mask, hiding who he actually was, and what he actually cared about, and what he was doing. And maybe, somewhere along the way, the mask and the face almost became indistinguishable. But Geen always knew what he wanted to do. He never lost sight of his plan. Because Aizen isn't the only one that plans things for a long time. Turn Back the Pendulum was a little over a century ago in the story, and Geen seemed to join up with Aizen around that time. So for over 100 years, more than any of our lifetimes will possibly be as human beings, more than 40,000 days, Geen has been plotting and lying in wait. That's an insane amount of time to have to pretend, to the point that it can't be obvious and it can't be seen as a ruse even once. And this is when things get a little complicated with the moral implications. Being on some undercover operation is hard enough as it is, but he wasn't trying to fool like a crime boss. Geen had to fool someone that was not only absurdly intelligent, but Aizen could literally be watching him at any moment, which is why I feel like in retrospect I need to reevaluate some of Geen's worst moments, because some sprang to mind during this revelation. Like one scene in particular was one I thought about when it was like, oh, Geen might not be so bad. I thought about, well, what about this? Was just before Rukia's scheduled execution, Geen teased her that he could free her, giving her a small flicker of hope, only to snatch it away moments later, saying he was just kidding as she was marched away to be killed. It was an unnecessarily cruel thing to do that to someone, and I'm like, why would he have done that then? He clearly enjoyed making people suffer. He always seemed to enjoy what he was doing, smiling, killing people and hurting people and tricking people, and that scene alone with Rukia seemed like more than enough evidence to say Geen is clearly a bad guy and he's evil. But then I got to thinking, and the circumstances around scenes like that one are much more intense than they appeared at the time. And even when you just look at them on the surface, you've got to go deeper than that and put yourself in Geen's shoes with everything we now know. With Aizen's power, you never really know if he's watching or he's listening. Geen could never be off. He could never slip up, even for a second. He had to always present himself as a sadistic character that relished bloodshed and was amused by cruelty. It was what he needed to be to get close to Aizen, and he could never risk being anything else, or he could accidentally have blown his cover. He had to be the exact evil snake he presented himself as each and every hour of the day. He could never slip up, never make a mistake. He had to be that person that he was trying to convince Aizen that he was at every hour of the day for over 40,000 days. He waited, he schemed, he watched, he obeyed, he hid his true self for 40,000 days. He could never take off his mask for a second. It's hard to really fathom how he made that happen. But essentially, he had to become awful. He had to be everything Aizen thought he was. In order to be trusted by the devil, Geen maybe had to actually become a demon. It may not have worked in the end, but he sacrificed all of that time for that mission, and that speaks volumes of what kind of man Geen really was, and for the power of what drove him to do this. So why did Geen do this? One thing about Gin that always stuck out to me like a sore thumb was his relationship with Rangiku. Every character that we saw with him seemed to either not trust Gin, or not like him, or find him uncomfortable, and understandably so, because he was so outwardly unsettling. But then there was Rangiku. She talked about him completely differently than everyone else. She was devastated by his betrayal, shocked that he could turn on the Soul Society, and I'm sitting there like, why are you shocked, lady? Have you seen that man? Of course he was going to betray you and everyone else. Just look at him. Look at how he acts. Of course he was a traitor. But Rangiku was devastated and shocked and couldn't believe it. It's like when Padme was shocked that Anakin would hurt younglings, when Anakin told her straight up that he massacred Tusken Raiders of all ages. She knew he was capable of that and she was still shocked. Love is blinding you, as Padme said. That may be the situation here. But Rangiku was shocked, and I was always like, Rangiku, why are you shocked? The closest thing to anyone else liking Gin was probably Izuru, but that felt like respect for his captain more than anything else. Speaking of which, I'm a little disappointed we didn't get an Izuru and Gin confrontation during all of this. The closest thing we got was Gin commenting about Izuru's development, but no. Rangiku's relationship with him felt much more personal than that, and I think it was. It hasn't ever been spoken aloud by either character, but I think it's pretty clear from what we've seen that there were romantic feelings between them at the very least, and very strong feelings. I don't think it was a full-blown relationship, but I absolutely think that they were in love and cared for each other more than anyone else. Rangiku's reaction to Gin's apparent betrayal has always come off like someone that is absolutely heartbroken, but still has feelings for the person that broke her heart. I've joked many times how I don't understand why Rangiku is clearly interested in the weird pasty snake man, but she clearly is. And Gin, well, I think him devoting his life to not only avenge her but to get back what was taken from her speaks volumes. This was all for her. Every action he took was for Rangiku. Because we see in flashbacks that Rangiku was one of Aizen's victims when she was a child. Aizen had some of his followers taking pieces of souls and feeding them to his Hogyaku, and Rangiku was among them. She got attacked and these guys took a part of her soul. This is bad enough on its own. We don't really get the specifics of what effect this might have on a person missing pieces of their soul, but it's more about the action that took place. This was a girl being not only assaulted in the street, but violated, having something pure and so personally hers taken from her. The subtext of this, of the horrible severity of this crime, is right there. It's very obvious, and Gin saw the aftermath of this horrible event. He knew what was done to her, and most of all, Gin knew who was responsible for it. After Gin seems to kill Aizen, he makes a point to grab the Hogyaku, which, remember, a piece of Rangiku's soul is presumably still inside, or at least the Hogyaku's power might be able to restore her soul to its rightful owner, because that's what Gin clearly wants more than anything. His heart's desire is he just wants to make the person he cares about whole again. He wants to make it so she never has to cry again. Actually, pause. As my brain's turning right now just talking about this, maybe this could be the main reason that Gin waited so long to strike. Maybe he needed the Hogyaku to be complete so that he could use its power to fix Rangiku's soul. Maybe that's it? I don't know. That's possible. His quest to avenge Rangiku is what his life's been about since it happened. He became a Soul Reaper because of it. He did horrible things to get close to Aizen because of it. Every awful action he committed was apparently just to earn Aizen's trust. Also that he could help Rangiku and make sure she wasn't hurt ever again. Gin did all of this for someone else. Nice guy, right? But like everything with Gin, it's not that simple. Gin is doing this for her, but because of what he has to do, he ends up doing exactly what he's trying to prevent. If his goal is to not have Rangiku cry, then I don't know if betraying her and making her think you abandoned her and completely shattering her emotionally is the best way to go about it, Gin. He ended up causing her a whole lot of anguish. Yes, in the grand scheme, he's trying to do something kind for her, but he hurt her to do it, which is what he was trying to not do. To some people, Gin devoting his life to avenging Rangiku may seem selfless, and it started that way, sure, but he handles it in such a selfish way. He doesn't tell her what he's doing. He hurts people to stay close to Aizen, and he turns himself into a villain. He apparently wanted to be the one to kill Aizen so badly that he let so many other opportunities to stop Aizen slip by. He's known about Aizen's intentions, he's known about his crimes and his plans for over 100 years, which is plenty of time to expose him, to speak up, all while still being there for Rangiku. But he didn't really handle things that way. Maybe he thought that course of action would fail in the end, which, fair enough. Aizen seemed to always have the edge in all sorts of ways, like just because Urahara knew the truth and told people about Aizen didn't help. But when it comes down to it, what ended up happening was Gin just caused Rangiku pain and then died in his failed attempt to help her. Gin prioritized his need for revenge over everything else. Yes, even over how much he cared about Rangiku. It started as an act of love and caring, but it turned into something else over time because of how he handled it. He hurt her not only through all of his lies and his seeming betrayals, but because of the path that he chose, Rangiku had to watch him die. Love sometimes makes people do some crazy, impossible things, for better or worse, and I think in this case, Gin lost sight of what was really supposed to be important, which was not causing Rangiku pain. I do think that Gin was self-aware enough to know that he really had to turn himself into a monster to get his vengeance, and there was really no turning back. I've mentioned before how interesting it was that Gin apologized to Rangiku when he defected, and it stood out back when I thought he was loyal to Aizen, because it felt like something he didn't have to do, but did anyway, and now, after learning all of this, I think that the apology is a moment of real sincerity from him, a hint of where his allegiance actually truly lies. It's more than just, sorry I'm betraying you, it's actually more of a sorry for everything I've done and everything I have put you through in my attempt to fight for your soul. Of course, Rangiku doesn't know the actual meaning of it at the time, but it's important that Gin apologized at all, and he thinks about how at least he had a chance to tell her he was sorry. It was obviously important for him to make sure that she knows how much he regrets what he feels he has to do. He knows what he's put her through with all of this, and he knows it's his own fault, and that he let his need to avenge her actually end up causing her more pain. Gin was sorry for all of it, but with how much time and energy he'd already put into all of this, at that point, the ends had to justify the means, and he was willing to do anything to kill Aizen, even hurting the person he cared about most. So even after all of his plotting for so long and all of the waiting for what seemed like the perfect moment, Gin fails. Aizen's connection with the Hogyaku keeps him alive, and he strikes down Gin for his betrayal, and we see his failure laid out before us, the results of a life driven by vengeance. It's a common point in stories that revenge usually doesn't end well for the ones seeking it. Whether it's that they lose their life in the process, or that they lose themselves along the way, or both. And when it comes down to it, Gin Ichimaru has been fueled by vengeance above all else. His desire to get retribution for Rangiku permeated every aspect of his life. In that respect, he's similar to his fellow turncoat Tozen. Both of their lives changed completely after seeing someone they cared about get hurt. Tozen's ire was directed at the system of the Soul Society itself, warping his need for justice into an all-consuming desire for revenge, while Gin's anger was directed only toward Aizen in a silent promise to get back at someone personally rather than a larger system. It was a private vendetta, but just as Tozen lost sight of who he could have been without vengeance, Gin gave up everything in hopes of killing Aizen someday. Just like with the symbolism of Tozen being blind in so many respects, whether it was physically, emotionally, philosophically, and finally achieving sight when he was perhaps at his most blind. moment. Gin was a man that almost always had his eyes closed, and I'm fascinated by this knowing what I know now. It could be that his shut eyelids represent not wanting people to look him in the eyes, as traditionally the eyes are viewed as the windows to the soul. If someone could look into his eyes, maybe they could see the real him, the one that was hidden behind his perpetually grinning mask. Or maybe he wanted to close his eyes to disassociate from all of the atrocities he committed with Aizen. There are a lot of interesting possibilities, but I like the thought that he didn't want people to see into his soul most. Whether it's Aizen or Rangiku, he closed his eyes so they couldn't see the real him. I think this one has the most merit, honestly, because it's only after attacking Aizen and then seeing that he had failed that Gin's eyes stay open for more than a moment, and he looks altogether different. His eyes are open and he isn't smiling all the time. It's the real Gin, exposed and vulnerable and outmatched. There's no reason to hide his true self in those final moments because he's already made his big move and laid all of his cards out on the table. All that's left is the truth, and the truth of the sacrifices he's made for the sake of killing Aizen. I absolutely adore how different he looks with his eyes open and his smile being gone. He always looked so creepy and phony because he was. His mask of insincerity is gone, and we're seeing the actual person for maybe the first time. It's crazy how much of a difference it can make visually by just having Gin open his eyes. Like, Kubo did a great job of portraying him as someone else. Like, it doesn't feel like Gin in those last few panels when he makes his move and then gets punished for it. It doesn't feel like the same Gin we've been reading and watching for so long. I like that a lot, how Gin just has to open his eyes to drop the mask. But I love that Kubo used both of Aizen's Soul Reaper allies to show different aspects about vengeance, and that both of their needs for revenge led to their respective ends. I don't think Aizen's allies ever really believed in him. Gin obviously didn't, and I'd argue Tozen cared more about hurting Soul Society than ever really caring about Aizen's ascension. Yes, maybe it would have led to a more just world, but his desire to destroy the system that betrayed him was the more paramount need for Tozen. Both Gin and Tozen used Aizen to accomplish their own vendettas in one way or another, and they both failed, and now they're both gone, leaving Aizen alone as he makes his final climb to reach the top. But Gin almost pushed him from the summit. It's a shame that he failed and instead saw something very different waiting for him at the end. The thing I loved the most about this series of revelations is that it leaves a lot of Gin's actions ambiguous and up for interpretation in some respects. We now understand what he's been doing and why he's been doing it, but we don't get a chance to see him explain each of his actions over the course of the series. Like I talked about earlier, some of his scenes where he just seems unreasonably evil, we don't get him, reassuring us that, oh yeah, I was just pretending right there. We don't get that. So instead we have to try to infer what he may have been thinking at those times, and if you haven't noticed by now, Gin is a hard man to read. All I can give is my own interpretation. Is Gin a good guy? No. I personally wouldn't go that far. I don't think him secretly being against Aizen absolves him of a lot of the horrible things we've seen him do throughout the series. Some of the things he did to get close to Aizen are irrefutably awful, and things that can't just be forgiven because, oh, I had good reasons, or, oh, I was doing that only to convince Aizen. He still killed people, he still hurt people, and from what we've seen, he wasn't doing any of this for the good of the masses and the greater good of the universe. He didn't want to kill Aizen to protect the world. It was a personal vendetta and nothing more. He cared about Rangiku and solely Rangiku, willing to hurt anyone else to get back at Aizen for her. So to me, Gin's vendetta was never about doing the right thing, or being a good person, or doing what's best for everyone, or triumphing over evil. It was, you hurt someone I care about, now I'm gonna hurt you. And I'm gonna hurt as many people as I need to get to you. That's what Gin is to me, and that's why I can't say, oh, he's a good guy. There just just isn't enough evidence to sway me to him being a hero entirely. He's doing something good and for solid reasons, but the execution of it requires him to be bad. And as much as he needs to be bad, like I said before, there may have been other paths he could have taken to go against Aizen, but he wanted to do it in a very personal way, and that required him to become something very bad and not that much better than Aizen. Maybe he really is sadistic and cruel, and maybe he enjoyed hurting those people, and the one redeeming quality is how much he cares for Rangiku, or maybe he lost himself in the persona he had to put on and was convinced by his own act. It's hard to say one way or the other. I personally don't think Gin is pure evil though. There is someone that he truly loves and cares about enough to want to help restore her very soul. That's a good thing. Like I said, maybe he went about it the wrong way in the long run, considering how many people got hurt along the way. But then again, he's up against something as insurmountable as Aizen's ambitions, and he had to do whatever he could to try to get to him. Like, maybe going to the authorities would have failed, maybe trying another way would have failed. And yes, this way failed, but Gin getting close to him and doing all these horrible things to be trusted by him did almost work. He almost killed Aizen, so it's hard to say. And I just love how Kubo doesn't try to convince us one way or the other, really. He doesn't excuse Gin's actions, and he doesn't try to justify them. He doesn't even go out of his way to make us understand all of those actions. He just shows us what Gin was trying to do, and it's up to us as the readers and the viewers to decide if Gin was right to do the things he did, and to figure out how much of it was part of the act. As he's breathing his last breaths, as Ichigo arrives, which, by the way, I was sort of completely right about Ichigo getting long hair, by the way. It's not a ponytail, but his hair grew. Anyway, as Gin sees Ichigo show up like this, as he's laying there dying from his injuries that Aizen gave him, he takes some comfort in thinking that Ichigo might be able to finish what he started. Like so many of Kubo's twists, it changes the way you look at previous events, and usually the recontextualized moments are made even better looking back. In this case, Gin's fight with Ichigo is improved because it wasn't just Gin trying to taunt Ichigo, but it was all him assessing whether or not Ichigo could beat Aizen if Gin failed. When he told Aizen that he was just testing Ichigo, it turns out he was kind of telling the truth after all. Looking back at that interesting moment when he told Ichigo that he was a disappointment and he should just run away, maybe Gin really was disheartened, thinking that Ichigo wasn't at the level he needed to be. Or maybe he really wanted him to leave to protect him because he was the only hope they had left. Whatever the case really was, Gin sees that whatever change Ichigo has gone through has paid off. He's not the frightened young man that Gin crossed blades with anymore. Gin's eyes are open to see that there's hope against Aizen, even after his life's work failed. It's a beautiful way to end a character like Gin, someone that spent his whole life working toward revenge that he fails to achieve, at least dies believing that his goal will still come to pass through someone else. His quest for vengeance killed him, as so many stories of revenge do, but it won't be in vain. I've enjoyed Gin in Bleach as the kind of antagonist that's fun to read because he seemed to be having so much fun being wicked and a problem for others, and that was how I saw him up until these chapters, as an entertaining villain. So was I wrong about Gin this whole time? Is he a hero and not the villain I thought he was? I think it's definitely more complicated than being right or wrong, about being good or bad. This particular character lives in a very gray area of morality, doing horrible things in an attempt to do a good one, fighting for love while also hurting the person he's fighting for. Lying in order to get retribution for a horrible truth. Gin is messy, and I'm so curious how people feel about him, whether he leans more toward being Bleach's hidden hero or a cruel villain that happened to have one redeemable quality. Whatever the answer is, however people look at him, Gin was always the snake in the grass. Lying in wait, but making sure people could see him there, making them believe that they'd know when he struck next, but in truth, he never lost sight of his real prey. That is his nature. He is a snake, patiently waiting to strike, and shedding whatever skin he has to stay alive until he does. In closing, from how I see it, Geen wasn't all good and he wasn't all bad. He was complicated, like so many people are. So was I wrong about Geen? Maybe, but maybe not. And that is the beauty of it, and the beauty of Geen Ichimaru as a character. R.I.P. Geen. Let's hope you didn't waste your life for nothing. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I know this was a long video, but all of this felt like it really needed a deep dive. So I had a lot of thoughts that I wanted to get out there, clearly. Thank you for giving me an outlet to do that. Yeah, please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel a little bit extra, please become a member. And I'll see you all at what looks to be the final battle against Aizen. We're almost there. Hopefully Ichigo wins. I'll see you then. Take care. Bye.